If I only had 1 minute to coach every student I come across, I wouldn't bother with anything related to strength or fitness or flexibility or training. I would only want to talk about being kinder to ourselves.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Struggle. It's me, Ryan. I am your host of this show, and today we've got Coach Louis Parkinson joining us for our coach conversation. Louis, you probably know, the dude's pretty big. He's a pretty big time guy. I don't know how we get him. How do we get him over here? I'll tell you how we got Louis. Glen, my editor, wonderful Patreon member and editor Glen, reached out to me. He's like, you need to hunt down Louis Parkinson and get him on the show. And I have, and I did, and he's here. And I'm so glad that he's here. Y'all probably know Louis. He's got a very, very popular YouTube channel called Catalyst Climbing. That's the name of his coaching business in and around London. And I think it's like top 5 climbing YouTube channels, top 3 or 4 maybe. It's massive. He's at like a couple 100,000 subscribers and millions and millions and millions of views. And that is for good reason, because Louis is just so positive and enjoyable and delightful and just infectious as a personality, as a coach, and he really knows his stuff. As a climber and as a competitor, he's incredibly strong and accomplished. He was on the GB climbing team. He was on the IFSC circuit. He is a V double-digit boulderer indoors and out, but mainly indoors, and that is the focus of this coach conversation today with Louis, is how we can get better at indoor climbing. And I'm telling you, it's an absolute friggin' masterclass. He's just got such a knack for identifying and then distilling concepts down that people of all levels, all ability levels, whether you climb V0 and this is like your first week at the gym, to V double digit, maybe you focus predominantly outdoors and use the gym as your training, maybe you spend all of your time in the gym and that is the crag for you. All of that, I think, is handled very well by Louis in this conversation here with me. And one of my main goals this year, as you may know if you've been following along, is to get better at bouldering, and particularly, since I'm spending so much time indoors, to get better at indoor climbing in general and find more joy from that process, but also just improve and take those gains from the gym back out to rock, but also just to have the gym be kind of the goal in and of itself. And Louis hits home run after home run in this one. Or he's English, so I don't know. He hits cricket wicket after cricket wicket. All right, I'm already going off the rails here. I'm going to get out of my own way. I also want you to know that we recorded a bonus episode for this. We don't usually record bonus episodes for Coach Conversations, but I had loads of questions come in from listeners for Louis, and they're so good and so insightful that I just created a whole other episode for it. So I'll tell you more about that on the back end. But first, let's get into this absolute masterclass with Captain Cut Loose himself, Louis Parkinson. I got my 2 dogs at my feet. They're snoring right now.
Oh, I've got my 2 cats in the room too. What a mix.
Oh man, the rivalry has already begun here. The dog versus cat rivalry. I've got a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, which seems appropriate. I think that's
you.
Those seem like royal dogs. Those seem like British dogs. And then I've got a mutt. I've also got 2 cats, but they're not in the room. Otherwise, things would be quite tense. It's a very small room that I'm in right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds like too much of a war zone that way.
How about you? Are your cats going to be showing me their butthole at times of this interview here?
Let's see. This is the handsome, stupid one.
Oh, look at this one.
Hello.
Yeah, quite handsome. I've got a black cat.
Handsome,
yeah,
yes.
Very good.
Go on your way. And
what's that guy's name?
He's called Ink. He's the one who's made it onto YouTube epistupid
Oh, of course. I recognize Ink. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. No, I think since he's been on YouTube, he's got a lot bigger, and I think his brain gets smaller every day. Stupid little animal, but I love him so much. And then the other one is called Trouble. She's just asleep on the bed. She's like 14 years older than him, so she's just a little old lady just asleep over there. So I won't bother her. But him, I'll bother all the time. I'll bring him over whenever you want. Have we already started, by the way?
I've started recording. I'm getting some levels, but I edit the podcast, if you need to take a break or, whatever. So there's no worries. It's not a flash attempt here. We can red point this podcast.
I'm all set. I've got my coffee. I've got my water. I've got all my cats.
Well, in preparation and in honor of this conversation, I've got some Yorkshire tea that I've brewed up here. So
how lovely. Is it nice, or does it just taste like hot brown water to you?
Well, mostly the latter. It mostly is hot brown water, but with some milk with some collagen, some vanilla collagen with a little bit of sugar. I just zhuzh it up a little bit. I don't know if
Nice.
Is it proper just to do it, just the tea and the water?
In my experience, only like monsters drink just black tea, no milk, no sugar. That, to me, and I think to most people, that's a pretty insane way to drink tea.
Yeah.
Like, black coffee, no milk, no sugar, I think is fairly normal. Black tea, not normal. At minimum, people have it with milk. Yeah. Most people have it with a little bit of sugar, or with a lot of sugar. If you're me, I like it with a lot of sugar.
But you're a coffee drinker.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. I'm trying to have slightly less caffeine nowadays, but I'm drinking coffee right now. So it's it's 3 minutes past my 3 o'clock caffeine cutoff, but it's not a strong coffee, so that's all right. I want to be like super focused for our chat, so.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a lot going on. You're a coach, you're a climber, you're training, you're making fantastic content for the rest of us in the climbing community that want to improve and enjoy the sport. So yeah, really a pleasure to have you on the show here, dude.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, man. No, honored to be here. What a lovely intro, though. That's very kind of you. Thank you, man. Those are all the things I do. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, you do those things, I'm sure, and many other things. What makes you happy, Louis? What, like, outside of climbing, like, what's the thing that sparks joy?
Man, to be honest, like someone asked me this recently of like when I've got my next holiday planned, and I very rarely take much of a holiday or do much else because I've got a really nice, varied weekly schedule. I get to do all the things I really like. I really love coaching people. I love making silly or sometimes not so silly, sometimes actually educational YouTube videos. I'm actually getting really into my own training at the moment and really enjoying that. And so, yeah, I kind of just do a mix of those things and then a little bit of time on like admin and some business management stuff. And I enjoy it all so much that the weeks and days just zip by. And before I know it, I'm like, I should probably take some kind of holiday, but I really like everything I'm doing. I'm very lucky that I get paid to do it because I'll probably be trying to do it for free otherwise. But that's pretty much it, man. Everything I do for work, fortunately, is the stuff that makes me really happy. Oh, I learned a really good term for this recently from a student. I learned so much from the students I work with, although I told a load of other people recently, and I only realized recently that I was mispronouncing it. It's a Japanese term. I'm going to double check it after I've said it, and we can edit it if I get it wrong. I think it's called ikigai. Now I'm going to double check it. It is called ikigai, even if I'm mispronouncing that. That's how it's spelled, so fine.
Very good.
And it's this really nice term for the crossover point in a 4-way Venn diagram of something you're good at, something that other people or the world needs, something that you enjoy doing, and something that people will pay you to do. And for me, all of the things that I get to do for work kind of perfectly fill that ikigai Venn diagram of I like doing it, I'm good at it, people want it, and it makes people happy, and I get paid to do it. So yeah, man, I think I do other things, not a lot else to be honest, but my work makes me really happy. It's what I spend most of my time doing. If I'm not working, I guess what you're asking, I watch an enormous amount of films and TV shows. I like watching good films, I like watching bad films, I go to the cinema all the time, I listen to film podcasts all the time, we do loads of film quizzes and like trivia stuff at home. I think that's probably like the main other thing I get up to. Other than that, just the classic stuff of I go see my family. I just saw my parents for lunch, which was very nice. Go see my sisters, just had a new baby, very exciting. See my friends on the weekend occasionally. We'll go for lunch or play some pool or something like that. But nothing particularly crazy or podcast worthy, I'm afraid.
That's all wonderful. That's delightfully kind of well-rounded like that.
Right.
And, for most everyone who's going to be listening to this, and myself included, I'm a weekend warrior. I love to climb. I climb for joy. I climb for pleasure. I climb for challenge. And I also have, a job and a family and kids and parents and, all sorts of other obligations and responsibilities and hobbies and all of that. And so it is nice to just even hear from you that not only do you get a lot of fulfillment from the work that you're doing, but there's, other stuff that you're out there doing as well. And we're going to be looking for our ikigai here through the lens of climbing and predominantly focused on indoor climbing and where we can hit that sweet spot where we're maybe improving as climbers, we're enjoying ourselves. Hopefully we're having fun and making the world a little bit of a better place, or at least the gym atmosphere a little bit of a better place. So we'll kind of look at those Venn diagrams through this lens as well, man. I'm really excited for that. But we got to enter through struggle because, it's the name of the show. So I'm just kind of contractually obligated to stick with it now that I've come up with it. So I hear a lot of enjoyment, a lot of stoke, and certainly you perform at the highest level as a climber and as a coach as well, but it can't all be easy. So where do you struggle in your climbing or in your training, Louis?
Oh, okay. Two things that I think I struggle with. One of which, actually no, both of which have got loads better recently, but they're complicated ones. So we're going in with big topics. I think for a long time, I viewed myself as someone who was very motivated and always really excited to do loads and loads of things. But I definitely view myself as very unfocused, very undisciplined, very chaotic. And actually, for a variety of reasons, I ended up confronting it pretty intensely recently. I think actually a lot of that came from having actually very low self-worth, which I've told it to friends before, and they're like, really? But you do all these things. You're like so busy all the time, and you run the business, and you do all the coaching, and you show off on YouTube, and you train so hard and do all your climbing. And yeah, one of them even said, they're like, what do you mean undisciplined? Like, you do all this stuff. And then pretty quickly I was like, yeah, no, actually, I never realised it before, but I've realised a few months ago, and since realising it, my life's actually improved massively. But I realised actually a lot of it was coming from a place of not actually having very high self-worth, not much genuine pride or belief in myself. And yeah, this constant fighting and struggling to be productive and achieve things and train as hard as I could was actually not out of a place that I was deeply happy from. It was more I think I need to do this little challenge and achieve this thing, because then I can be proud of myself just for a moment and not feel like worthless dirt for a little while. And yeah, I'm starting with this big, heavy overshare of a slight mental health struggle I had recently with self-worth. And now I've overcome it and feeling loads better.
Well, thank you for sharing it, because it's, probably not an uncommon, thing for people to go through at different phases of their lives, different seasons of their lives. I've certainly experienced some of that myself as well. And oftentimes looking for some external validation or I just hustle extra hard, But sometimes it's hard to look inward, though. It looks like you've been doing some good hard work along those lines. I'm really happy to hear that it's paying off.
I mean, that's actually why I think I'm becoming less nervous about feeling like I'm oversharing to talk about this. Because so far, mostly what I've found is a lot of people find it quite relatable. And they're like, yeah, you know what? I actually don't feel like I'm that good on the self-worth stuff either. Or at worst, I think it's nice to share about it and to be open about this stuff. I think it can sometimes take strength to be vulnerable about these things. So yeah, I think that would be, if we're talking about struggles and things, I would say, oh man, and that's the other one that surprises me. I was like, the main thing, and I talk about it on YouTube, struggle not to talk about it in every coaching session that I do with people. I'm constantly banging on about you've got to be kind to yourselves. Right. It's really helpful for your mindset. And apparently I've only realized about 2 months ago that I was applying none of it to myself. Right. So yeah, not struggling with it anywhere near as much as I was, or maybe I'm struggling with it the same amount, but I hadn't realized I was struggling with it before, and I'm now aware of it and being genuinely kinder to myself. And so that's got a lot better. But yeah, I think if we're talking about struggle, that actually would probably underlie a lot of the mindset and other stuff that I wanted to end up talking about on this episode. So there we go. That's the struggle I've been having.
Thank you. Thank you for entering into it through this kind of vulnerable, relatable place. Really, I was just hoping for you saying like, hey,
I find footwork difficult. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Finger strength. It's the hangboard's been the struggle, but no, you've actually brought something very real and quite layered. And
we can backtrack, and I can just say footwork was hard, and I've got better at it now. We can talk about that if you want an easier journey for our podcast. I'm happy with that, man.
No. We never like the easy journey over here, although footwork I struggle with. So we can talk about that in this conversation as well. But man, thank you so much for entering into that. What really excites me the most about the conversations that I get to have with the biggest names in climbing, and that's from Adam Andra to Lynn Hill and everyone in between. I've been so fortunate to have these conversations. And when we dig into the mental game aspect, mindset, it's just such rich territory because it is very relatable, and I'm not climbing or ever will climb at the levels of most of the people that I've talked to on this show, but we connect, and often connect the most, I think, over mindset, and whether that's a fear of failure or just trying to achieve the next thing and, quote unquote, have like this relevance or show that you're constantly progressing, or fear of falling. There's some common themes that come up that are quite relatable. So I really appreciate you, being open and sharing that. And we can take that into this conversation however we want. I'm really excited because as a coach, as an elite climber yourself, you just bring such a wealth of experience, but also perspective. All the different athletes that you've worked with all have their own unique experiences. And, for myself, I'm still I feel like I've been at this for a little while, but I still have so much to learn. And, we predominantly want to focus on indoor climbing here and how we can get more joy and fulfillment and improve as climbers. But we can take the conversation wherever we want to go. I got loads of questions as well from listeners for you, so we can pepper those in.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, maybe a good jumping off point for us as we enter into this here is for me to get your perspective on indoor climbing and really what differentiates it from outdoor climbing, and why you enjoy it, why you feel it's special. I'm predominantly, just to bring a bit of kind of a lens from where I'm at, I predominantly climb in the gym to prepare for outdoor climbing. And I'm predominantly a route climber. I do sport climbing, but I've got this goal this year to become a stronger boulderer and to become better at indoor climbing and gym climbing and some of the styles that push me out of my comfort zone. So I'm kind of going right at it and spending a lot more time in the gym. And many people who are listening right now, and many climbers, as you know, the gym is their crag. They don't use the gym as a means to an end, but it is the end in and of itself. It's the joy, the challenge, the community. If they're pushing grades in the gym. If they're just preparing, they're preparing to go try that new route that just went up in the corner. So it's a wandering way to tee this up, but I'd love to hear from your example kind of where you feel indoor climbing, gym climbing kind of separates itself from outdoor climbing, and then the joy of indoor climbing in and of itself.
Man, okay, loads to talk about here. So, okay, let's start talking about the main differences between a day spent in an indoor gym versus a day spent outdoors. I think huge obvious difference, there's no nature in the indoor climbing gym and there's beautiful nature in the outdoor day on rock that you're spending. I don't do so many of those. I'm based in London. I absolutely love climbing outdoors whenever I get the chance to. I nowadays actually do it infrequently enough that it feels outside of my comfort zone. I think a lot of people, I'm sure this is very relatable, if you're used to climbing indoors where the holds are brightly coloured and you can see where to go and you have a rough idea of the difficulty that's going to be, and huge bonus, you can explode off in any direction and you're guaranteed a nice comfy landing on a big padded mat. Outdoors for me, by comparison, feels scary. And I noticed that until I've spent a few days warming up into it, I move differently because I'm scared of falling off because I don't want to land on a rock. I mean, benefit of being outdoors, it's nice outdoors. See the sky, see the trees, see the animals, see the nature. Beautiful. Probably a more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, just healthier experience. It's nice to be outdoors. It's good for humans to be outdoors. And indoors don't have that. I would add indoors, warm, cozy, coffee on demand, usually someone's playing nice music. That's all pretty good. So yeah, obviously there's I'm kind of just describing the benefits of being outdoors or indoors. So not a hugely valuable thing to explore. I think the main differences that I'd otherwise talk about are the differences in grades, the differences in movement styles, and the differences in how effective it can be for a training session. So, okay, differences in grades. I think we all know they're completely different. Outdoor grades generally known as being way harder at the lower end. Mostly in my experience, I've found that as we get nearer V8, V9, V10 or so, the grades start to feel a little bit more similar to the indoor stuff. But the other thing I've also found, as I'm sure you found as well, Ryan, the grades vary wildly between different climbing gyms. I think there's a good reason for the grades being much more accessible at the lower end. And I would do exactly the same thing. If I ran a climbing gym, I would want people to enjoy themselves and I would want them to come back because it's good for my business. So I would not want them to get their butts kicked and hurt their egos and not be able to do anything. So in my understanding, an outdoor V0 is meaning roughly on the lines, when you do the right sequence well, it requires a very low amount of strength. V0, outdoors. In my understanding for indoors, V0 means anyone who comes in on their first day, regardless of their sporting background or especially climbing experience, should be able to get to the top of pretty much any V0 they get on in the gym. That's what we want V0 to mean indoors. So the grading system feels quite different.
Well, and just a question on that as well. And I don't know why it hasn't hit me until just now that this is the case, but outdoor grades are based on a democratic process, a consensus, right? The first ascensionist will suggest a grade, but then maybe hundreds or thousands of people, will nudge that up or down. Whereas indoors, I guess some gyms maybe allow members to vote or something like that. But for the most part, the route setter is going to set a grade, right? And then it may be wrong, if you will, if you get 100 gym members to climb on it, but the tag doesn't change. The number on the tag doesn't change.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. You're right. You've explained it perfectly. I won't elaborate on it further. The grades outdoors decided by loads and loads of people, grades indoors, one person who hopefully is good at their route setting, tries to make their best guess on the day after a full day of route setting, and now that's the grade. So, Who knows? And then actually, I think the difference in movement style, indoors, you tend to have a lot more in the way of stuff I really enjoy. Bouncy, jumpy, parkour style or competition style climbing, which to me, if I was to describe it to a student, means a move which requires multiple dynamic combination movements where you stop or slow down in several different dead points before doing another little combination of movements, stopping in another dead point, and eventually settling on another position. That is much rarer outdoors. I think if we were to take a random sample of, let's say we took all the climbs from one crag, so 100 boulder problems, and we looked at how many of these have a dyno to a jug where you then foot plant. Maybe one, probably none. You probably need to take a larger sample before you even get one of those. Indoors, I feel like it is more than 0 in 100. I like it. I'm really on board with it. I really enjoy that style of movement. And to be honest, I like the variety that I get to do in an indoor gym. That's actually, to be honest, one of the things I really enjoy about climbing indoors. Not that outdoor climbing is boring, but you're much more likely to do crimp, move my foot, crimp, move my foot. It can't vary that much. And if it did start involving crazy coordination dynos, I probably wouldn't want to do that outdoors, so I'm going to land on a rock. So yeah, the movement variety indoors is much, much higher, which I think is cool. But for me, that also massively confuses me on the grading system. There's a climb that I was talking about with a student yesterday where, we ended up talking about what the grade felt like at length. Because they asked me, they're like, when you do that move, what grade does it feel like? Because it's got a V6 tag on it. Does it feel like V6 when you do it? I was like, well, no, not really. But let's talk about that in detail, because I kind of explained it as saying, I think the physical strength required for you basically launch off a jug and then at a not dangerous, but a slightly exciting sort of height, you jump into a corner and jump into this bridging position. So a pretty wild, exciting move. But I was like, well, okay, the physical strength I'm using for it, not very high. I've pulled harder on V2s and V3s sometimes.
Right.
The confidence level required to just smash for it as you need to do the move successfully, I actually might put as higher than V6. I actually think that's some pretty courageous stuff you're having to do of launching into a corner, jumping onto these sketchy volumes. So I guess V6 is kind of in between those numbers. So I guess we say V6, but I wish I could give it multiple different grades of, you need this level of confidence, you need this amount of understanding of coordination and timing. You actually only need this amount of strength, but, giving it one number makes it really difficult.
I love that idea. When you take over global gym grading, which I think now that's going to have to be part of your Venn diagram.
I'm on it, yeah.
Having grades by bucket like that. A skill grade, a strength grade, and a mental game grade?
But but that's also what I find confusing is, sorry, we'll get off grades in a minute, but I end up talking about it so much in sessions. Surely, okay, the grades can't be complete nonsense because there are many much better climbers who've been climbing far longer who clearly are completely on board with the grading system and will do something outdoors and go, yes, this is this grade. I feel like I'm the only one who's baffled going did we not all agree that climbing is a subjective experience? So why are we putting an objective grade on it? Because you've had the same thing, surely. Sometimes I come in and do a climb and I'm like, okay, cool, it says V6, felt like V1 to me. And then I come in the next day in a slightly different mood or with slightly less energy. I'm like, oh, I actually can't do the start move today. Or I manage it, but I felt like V10 now. And then aside from me having my own subjective experiences of it, if someone a completely different size tries it, they're not doing the same moves. And if I was to proportionally change the climb so that I was doing the same moves as them, I would now give it a completely different grade. So what are we doing? I don't understand it at all, Ryan. I don't get it. But anyway.
Neither do I. And by the way, you know, John Sherman, who came up with the V grading system in the first place,
I love his quotes.
Says that it's bullshit. You know, he says the whole thing is bullshit.
I love that quote so much. Yeah, Verm Sherman, the V grading system named after him, specifically says, we invented it as a joke. It went from V1 to 3. It was just me and my friends messing around. And I think, maybe I'm misquoting it, but he's something along the lines of, I hate that it has turned climbing from this lovely, artistic movement style pursuit into measuring and giving it numbers and things like that.
I ran into him at the crag here in Kentucky at the Red River Gorge and was so psyched and just like had a conversation. And I said, you know, it's really wild that like this whole V thing has just like taken off. And he's like, yeah, you know, it's the craziest thing. It's like you have this beautiful meal. You go to a restaurant, you have this beautiful meal that's got all these colors and flavors, and it's this whole experience. And then you judge it by the shit that comes out in the toilet the next day. He's like, that's the V system.
I love it. Oh, man, I'm so glad to go to meet you. You sound amazing.
Yeah, he said, you look in the toilet and you take a look at it in the toilet and you say, yeah, that was a V5 meal. He's like, well, why don't you judge the meal based on the meal and not on the turd that's in the toilet afterwards? I was like, man, that's the way to go at it.
I often do a really fun exercise with students, kind of based around this idea where we go, okay, let's pick 3 V4 climbs around the gym. So usually around their like mid-grade. So they can do it in a couple of goes. And all we do is we go around and we climb them together. Sometimes we try out a couple of different sequences. And then I've done a YouTube video about it recently where we're like, okay, now let's pretend, similar to what John Sherman was talking about. I was like, let's pretend we are boulder critics in the same way as food critics. And we are now going to critique the boulders that we just sampled. We had a nice tasting menu. And we usually go through reviewing the different aspects of challenge that we experienced on it. So like, how much strength did I use on that? How complicated was that one? How risky did it feel? Then we'd also talk about the aesthetics of it. Sometimes we're like, oh, actually, I've had this before with a student where we're like, the climb itself actually was nothing special. It was just kind of an all right climb. But actually, of all the climbs we tried, that was my favorite one because we had so much fun trying it together. I would give it like a 5-star experience that I had on that climb with you. That was great fun. The climb itself, whatever, but the time we had climbing it together was great. Like, yeah, man, completely on board with all this stuff.
I like that a lot.
Anyway, away from the grades. So we're talking about the differences between indoor and outdoor climbing. We talked about what's different about being outdoors versus being in a room. But fine, we talked about that. And then we talked about the differences in grades, and we've now talked about the difference in movement. I think the last thing that's good for us to talk about is the difference in, I guess, usability for training. Overall, I would say indoor climbing, and this is kind of why it exists, indoor climbing is better for training for climbing. The only thing I think you don't get to practice, as shown by my feeling of discomfort when I'm actually climbing outdoors, you don't actually practice the skill of climbing outdoors, which is a skill in itself. You need to be able to understand the weather forecast. Sometimes I can't find the boulder I'm looking for. You need to be able to know how to pad the landing, read the rock. All of this sort of stuff is a skill set in itself, which you obviously don't gain climbing indoors, as I do. Aside from that, though, I think the volume of climbs that you can try within a day at the climbing gym or within a couple of hours at the climbing gym, the number of other people there to bounce ideas off and share knowledge and psych with, the variety in movement, really helpful. I think overall, the experience of climbing indoors gives you so much more scope for learning and improving than you could get from outdoors. Other than that one bit that I mentioned of you do also need to be actually good at climbing outdoors, which I don't value myself as particularly good at that.
All right, y'all, I just want to take a quick second here to tell you about some voodoo magic chalk that I've tried out recently. It's by Rungni. You guys know Rungni. It's Magnus Mitbo's company. They've been supporting this show for a really long time now, which I love. Thank you, Rungni. But this chalk that they just came out with, I don't even know if you can call it chalk. It's called Maglock, and it's like chalk. It's a super expensive type of chalk for a bag of it, but you only use a teaspoon. And I tested this stuff out with Emil Abrahamson when we were out in Portland shooting some videos together. And we did like a side-by-side test hanging from a giant, nasty sloper in the gym. And by far, when we put the mag lock on first and then used like regular mag dust afterwards, we hung way longer than when we were just using regular chalk. So like, if you've got a project and you're like, look, I need that extra little edge to level up and send this thing, check out the Maglock. It's just wild how it feels and how it works. I don't need to sell it. Just try it and you'll see the difference. You can use code STRUGGLE and get 10% off pretty much everything over at Rungny. You can get a bundle, which will score you some free shipping. And again, if you use that code STRUGGLE over at Rungny.com, that also helps me to continue to make these shows that you're listening to. Quick shout out to our friends over at Scarpa who have been sporting the struggle here for a long time now. And then me as a climber, I've been climbing in Scarpas for over a decade. My very first pair of climbing and approach shoes were Scarpa, and I love them so much. And I want to tell you about 2 new shoes that they just came out with. First, the Instinct VSR LV. You've probably seen Nathaniel Coleman and Alex Puccio talking about these. I posted a picture when I got mine. They're purple and black and white, so already winning. But what's the LV stand for? Low volume fit. So if you've got a narrower foot or you like a really technical feel to your toe box and your heel, the low volume is probably the shoe for you. It's also got this extra patch of toe rubber on the front with an aggressive texture and extra structure in the heel for excellent heel hooking ability. This shoe's super technical. It's really beautiful, and it's got that extra sticky VSR rubber on it. And then this new hiking and approach shoe that they just came out with, the Rapid, are so good. The LT's the lightweight version with recycled content and a knit upper, and then the XT is the extremely abrasion resistant version for the harshest alpine conditions. It's got a suede upper, also recycled content, and they both implement the active fit and active impact technology in those. You guys, Scarpa's been sustainably making the best adventure footwear since 1938, and they support me over here at The Struggle. Show them some love over at scarpa.com. That link is right there in your show notes. I think that sets the table really well as we really now want to shift towards indoors as an enjoyment, an art, a pleasure, training, pushing our limits, our grades, getting out of our comfort zone, developing skills, all the things now through the lens of a gym and being at a gym, and more differentiating from like any sort of like home wall setup or spray wall or whatever, but just like, the experience of going to a gym where there are going to be sets that are, turning over on a semi-regular basis and set at different grades. And I think most people listening to this right now are going to be familiar with like a gym experience. Fortunately, gyms are very plentiful these days as opposed to maybe 20 years ago. So yeah, let's look at the gym now that we know the stakes here, or rather the differences between indoor and outdoor in terms of the experience and maybe the preparation. But essentially, I'm living this right now. I want to become a better gym climber, and I don't quite know where to start. I know how to project outside. I know how to, do all the little things to improve my chances when I get out to the proj. Inside, I would still consider myself to be a bit of a noob. So maybe that's a good, I can be like a little bit of a good case study here in this conversation. And again, I have a lot of questions that people wrote in, but I'll just hand it off to you and you can enter into this wherever you'd like. But essentially, how can we get better as gym climbers?
Broad question, but this is also what I do on a daily basis. This feels very similar to my job, Ryan. Right. Oh, a student has just come into the gym and they want to get better, but they don't know where to start. If they knew how to get better, then they'd probably go off and do it. But sometimes I usually ask it at the start of a session. I'll go through the usual preamble of like, how long you've been climbing, how often you've been climbing. That's actually a good one to check. I didn't used to check that, of how often per week do you usually climb. And then I got 2 specific answers recently where I was like, nope, I'm going to start checking that. Because I had one person who was like, yeah, I climb like once every few months, but I'm not getting any better. Like,
right.
You need to go more and you'll get better.
That'll be 200 pounds.
No, I didn't charge them for that. I was just within the first few minutes. But I also had the opposite end of the spectrum where someone was like, not as much as this, it's an exaggeration, but they were pretty much saying like, oh, I climb twice a day, 7 days a week. My arms hurt. Like, yeah, they're going to fall off. You can't do that. Usually if people say somewhere between 2 and 4 times a week, I'm like, yeah, that's a good balance. Usually 2 to 3 hours, like as in I arrive at the gym and then I leave 2 to 3 hours later. If they were giving me roughly those answers, I'm like, this all sounds good so far. No alarm bells ringing. I'm happy with this. So maybe I guess the first thing I'd check is like, are you actually going to the gym enough or are you going too much? And then usually then I'll check like, oh, have you got any injuries? Do you have any injuries at the moment actually, Ryan?
No, I don't.
Oh, well
Knock wood.
done. But an intact student is actually fairly rare. Well done, man. So yeah, okay, we'll check for injuries. And then, yeah, usually I ask like, okay, so what do you want? Sometimes people already have an idea of like, I get booked for this a lot. They're like, I want to be better at jumpy, bouncy, dynamic movement. I want to be better at using momentum. And obviously you're known for being good at teaching that, which is why I'm here. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, great. Obviously, let's go and do that then. So we'll go through. That's always great fun. More often, though, people will kind of say like, well, no, I don't know how to get better. I was hoping if I knew that, I wouldn't come to the lesson. I was hoping someone could kind of watch me climb and tell me what they see. And yeah, this is usually what I do with people who are like, great, okay, so let's warm up. Let's do a few easy climbs, some medium ones, a few different styles, different levels of difficulty. And generally what I view as my job is to watch them climb and work out what are, according to the things they actually want to use their climbing for, what should we prioritize, which would be the easiest to practice and improve, which would have the quickest knock-on effect for their top end of their climbing. So for a lot of people, yeah, I mean, it's probably a slightly biased experience because I am specifically known for teaching dynamic movement stuff, but a lot of people, we do end up working on some dynamic movement stuff because they're often not very dynamic, which is why they come for the lesson. But they say...
I'd love to explore that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interject, but,
not at all, man. We'll come back to that in a second. The only thing I was going to add was I sometimes would agree with a student that's not relevant for them if they've said, the only thing I want to do is there's a specific trad climb that I've got in mind which has no jumpy, bouncy nonsense at all. So yes, we both agree that is not a skill set that I have, but we're also agreeing I don't need that. Right. A lot of people, though, and I think maybe you as well, would kind of say like, no, I want to be a more well-rounded climber. So watch me climb, tell me what you see, and then tell me what to practice. And yeah, for a lot of people, I do a lot of work on the main thing I find myself focusing on nowadays is fluidity and movement and mindset, some of the stuff we talked about earlier. So, okay, let's imagine, Ryan, if we're continuing this framing device for our podcast, we're in the gym together. You've said like, yeah, I want to get better at gym climbing. Generally, I want to become more well-rounded. I've now watched you climb and maybe a prediction, but I'm expecting that you would climb as someone who has experienced climbing outdoors would, which is not wanting to expose themselves to too much risk, moving relatively slowly and with good control. And so I would then want to convince you, as I'm going to try and do in a minute, that using more momentum is obviously going to help you be more well-rounded in the gym, and you're going to be able to now complete competition-style jumpy coordination boulders if you want to. So now there's more of the gym that you can enjoy. But I'd also make some good arguments that this is a really good skill which will also transfer to the outdoor climbing that you want to do. So great, we're now at the point in the lesson where we're like, cool, let's do some dynamic movement practice together. This sounded good so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And I think to your point, hopefully it will help me, specifically Ryan, I'm talking about now, to transfer outside. But again, the goal for this conversation, or the focus of this conversation, is that the gym climbing is the crag. And to your earlier point, when we were talking about the difference maybe between indoor and outdoor, is that there is a much higher concentration of momentum, coordination type problems at the gym. And as you just said, hey, this will unlock more areas of the gym, more climbs in the gym for you to just go out and enjoy. And so that's great. Whether I'm a beginner climber and not comfortable using a lot of momentum because I just haven't learned or I haven't been exposed to it yet, or in my case, a more experienced climber, but I do long, pumpy sport climbs where I'm mostly kind of climbing quite statically, or trad climbs where I'm definitely climbing very statically. And so either way, neither of us are very accustomed to the coordination style. So I think this is a fun one, at least to unpack first, obviously an area of expertise of yours, and then we can explore some other styles of climbing that we might find in the gym as well. But let's start with the momentum side.
Let's start with that. I mean, the first thing I'd also say is I love this style now, and I think I am kind of generally known for being the dyno guy who does lots of jumpy, bouncy stuff. But I still remember, like, I make myself sound old. I'm not that old, but I remember when I learned to climb in the gym, there was dyno to a jug at most, and sometimes that came up. But mostly it was just left, right, crimp, crimp. And it's only over the time that I've been learning how to climb and progressing as a climber in the gym that this slightly more dynamic movement, well, much more dynamic movement style has slowly evolved. I remember the first time someone set a dyno to 2 jugs, and you had to like split your focus and catch 2 things either side. All of us were like, wow, oh my God, what? Two, your hands have to go in different directions. Wow, that's crazy. And so, yeah, now over time, like slowly, more and more movements, I think largely starting in competitions and then route setters just experimenting more and more. I've really enjoyed it. I know lots of other climbers specifically don't enjoy it. And I actually would also say that's maybe the first thing to fix is if you are saying like this stupid parkour style, I hate it. If you're approaching it with that mindset, it's going to be hard to practice it. And obviously you're not feeling that way because you want to practice it, so that's great. But for a lot of other people, I would say get on board. It's super fun. Why would you not want more variety of movements to practice? It's what we're all here for, is to learn cool moves.
Well, and just to tease that out just a little bit, when you do meet with climbers who are coming to you and maybe have that hesitation around that style of movement, what are the reasons most often that are cited, or what are you kind of teasing out in the mindset that makes them have this fear or aversion or judgment of that style?
Matt, really appreciate that prompt because it's actually one of the more important ones to talk about. I think it comes from three, maybe two areas of, I guess I'd say, insecurity. I'm worried about hurting myself. I'm worried about, because it's called risky movement. What if I fall off, or what if I like jump towards the volume and smash my face against the wall? I don't want to get hurt. Or I think the other one, which is a really, really significant one, I feel like I'll look like an idiot trying to learn it. And I'll be like lumbering along and trying to do something that's supposed to look graceful and easy. And it will look terrible and I'll feel terrible doing it. And I'm not going to enjoy practicing it.
Both of these are resonating with me.
Yeah, no, they're both incredibly reasonable. Like, right. Yeah, the idea of, well, I don't want to look stupid. And I think I'm going to look stupid learning something new. And I'm worried about getting hurt. Both incredibly reasonable reservations to have about learning dynamic movement. But let's talk about those first, because that's usually a really good starting point. I'd also say a lot of people, and it's not a generational thing, because, lots of people can be scared of getting injured or scared of looking stupid. But I would say it tends to be slightly older climbers. And I think this is probably worse for them because the anxiety of getting injured is probably higher because they feel a bit more fragile in a slightly older body. And the change of pace from feeling like, no, I already know how to climb. I've been doing it for 20 years. And now I have to feel like a complete beginner again, learning something new, sucks. And I don't want that. I think all of that is heightened as an older climber. So it's more likely that I talk about this stuff with them. So let's talk about them both separately. Let's talk about the risk of injury first. And generally just risk in general. I really enjoy talking about this because I think it's really interesting to talk about at the least. A bunch of stuff that I normally mention, but the first one, I guess, is saying, well, if we want to avoid risk, then you're in the wrong sport. Like, this is an inherently risky thing we're doing. We like climbing because it's exciting and because it's a slightly dangerous thing to do. We take risks. And anytime, even climbing to the top of a jug ladder, which we know is way below our limits, there is still a risk that you could mess it up and fall and land on your face and hurt yourself. There's always a risk. So I think what we'd then talk about is they're like, yeah, but obviously the risk of me hurting myself doing something dynamic is way higher, right? And then I'll usually explain, I'm like, okay, well, let's explore that. Because I feel very confident doing dynamic movement. Like launching myself, as we talked about on that climb earlier, launching myself into a corner and jumping onto a couple of sketchy volumes, I feel confident doing it. I think that confidence, and this is also something that we'd talk about as we go through learning a more fluid climbing style, if you do it without thinking, you'll do it better and you're less likely to mess it up. And if you don't mess it up, you're not going to get hurt. So if you feel confident with it, that will make it easier. So, okay, let's explore why I feel confident with it and specifically how familiar I've become with this specific type of risk and how that makes me feel confident. So usually the explanation I give them is like, okay, well, let's do a breakdown of the statistical experience that I've had with risks that I've taken. Let's say over my last 2 decades of climbing, I have attempted 1 million different dynamic jumpy moves. Every time I try it, I have the risk that I might fall and break my leg or smash my face on a volume. So let's actually look at what's happened, and you can quickly see why I feel really confident doing it. 1 million attempts. How many times have I successfully pulled off a cool move? Actually, probably not that many. Probably like, let's say 10,000 times out of 1 million. So I think I'm saying
1%. Yeah,
1% success rate.
I would say it's probably more than 10,000 out of 1 million, but that's all right. You're essentially you're missing the move a lot.
But yeah, okay. I actually don't think that's unreasonable. I think there are some moves which might take me 100 tries before I land them. There are others that might take a lot less. That's true. But there's also others that I might have tried way more than 100 and never ended up sticking. So, okay, let's do a rough assessment. 1 million attempts, only 10,000 successes, 1% success rate. So what's happened the other 90% of the time? Let's divide, because if I fall off, there's going to be a consequence. I usually divide it as low consequence and high consequence. Low consequence would be, well, I fell off and landed on the mats and nothing happened, or it was scary, but nothing happened. Or maybe I'd say I bonked my elbow a little bit, or I scraped my shin slightly, but I'm able to try the boulder again within minutes. I would put that as low consequence. And I am, to be fair, covered in cuts and scrapes. I think low consequence falls and little cuts and scrapes are the price of learning some cool things. So that's fine. The high consequence falls, which do happen sometimes, I fall and I land badly on my arm, or I land badly and I twist my ankle or something like that. So yeah, what has happened that other 90% of the time? And actually, yeah, realistically, I look at it going, well, the overwhelming majority of the time, it's a low consequence fall. Actually, I think if I think back on all of those million tries, there might be maybe 5 high consequence ones. I can only actually really remember 2. I'm assuming there must have been more, but I can only genuinely remember 2 different ones. I remember once I slipped off on a dynamic move right at the top of a competition wall, which wasn't inherently dangerous. Loads of other people had fallen off it. I just happened to slip in a slightly different way, and I twisted my ankle, and it swelled up, and a couple of weeks later I got back to climbing. That sucked. I didn't like that. And I did notice I learned to be a little bit more scared from that. And I had to rebuild my confidence afterwards and kind of repair my relationship with risk. And then I had one other time where, oh no, I've actually done this at least twice. I've done this at least twice. I can think of 2 now. You know those ones where you do a fast run towards the wall and you're going to jump off a volume? And I did the absolute nightmare of I completely missed it and just ran really hard straight into the wall. And it hurts. And it's embarrassing as well. It really sucks.
It's literally what I think I'm going to do every time I do one of these problems. Every single time I'm like, I'm going face first into this wall.
We're going to explore that in a second.
The point that you're making is that it doesn't always happen. So yeah, go ahead and continue.
Not even doesn't always happen. Overall, I look at that relationship with risk and I'm like, okay, so 1% of the time I do it successfully. 99.9995% of the time, I mess it up with no consequence, and 0.00005% of the time, it could hurt. But overall, I look at that going crazy good odds. Yeah, okay, obviously I'm going to try this. If that was your risk of an operation or something genuinely scary, it's not a risk you'd ever pay attention to. You would never worry about this stuff. And then I kind of try and get people onto the idea of what I'm saying is when we get familiar with a certain risk, it stops feeling as risky. Once we actually get a grasp on what is the most likely thing to happen here, as I've done with my own experience with dynamic movement, it stops feeling like a risk. And there are things that I bet people do on a daily basis which are inherently way riskier than the stuff you and I are talking about now. And they're just so familiar with it that it doesn't feel like a risk. And usually the one I point them towards is well, do you drive a car? That is more risky already. Crossing the road, going up and down stairs. But and this is also what's tricky sometimes, is someone would say, reasonably, they'd say, I tried a dynamic move. I've only tried a couple. I tried one. I slipped. I broke my ankle. I don't want to do it anymore. That seems like a bad relationship with risk. And possibly an unfair analogy, but I'm like, well, okay, as I've just said, if going down the stairs, I've always got the risk of slipping and falling. If I was to slip and fall and break my leg, I hope I wouldn't respond by saying oh, well, I guess I can never go downstairs again. I'd need to be able to do it again. But that's not to diminish anyone who has had an injury with dynamic movement. I think it's also really unlucky, and it is harder to work on. If I'm saying, well, I've got 1 million experiences and overall the relationship I've had is fairly positive, if someone else would say, well, I've had 3 experiences and 2/3 of the time I've fallen off and sprained my ankle, so I've not learned to be confident with this. Overall, though, my main point that I'd like to make is, in order to build confidence with this, and in order to do it without thinking and to execute it well, we need to become more familiar with risk. And that's what we'll get onto in a minute. The last thing that I'd think is good to talk about is that insecurity of, what if I look stupid trying to learn it? Because, as you said, yeah, that's definitely something that people would feel. It's tricky, because I can't think of anything that I've tried to learn where I don't feel insecure about looking like a beginner and like an idiot while I'm trying to learn it. I think it's good to kind of just accept that and talk about it with them, going yeah, that's realistic. you might feel a little bit stupid. But I'm also just going to do a little reality check. If you were already good at it, we wouldn't need to work on it. And
Right.
And I also usually, although I have had people get this bizarrely wrong before in a lesson where I'm like, okay, well, when I demonstrate it, it looks fancy and graceful. Why do you think that is? Is it because I've got like magic powers or something? And they're like, yeah, magic powers. I'm like, no. I practiced it. And this is all also really good for people to like realize. I'm like, you didn't see what it looked like when I was first trying to learn this. It looked the same as what you're doing or what I'm expecting you to do in a couple of minutes. So let's accept that you might look and feel a bit silly, and that's fine. That's how learning stuff is supposed to be. But then I do a lot of work, and when I train other coaches, the main skill I focus on with people is, and I think it's the most important skill that a coach can have, your communication and your empathy skills. And I'll do a lot of work in my sessions in what I comment on, in the way I phrase things, to reinforce the idea that you're not supposed to look like a master at this. You're supposed to be a learner, and we can kind of enjoy that. It's cool to learn stuff. There might be a point where we get so good at something that it's not fresh and exciting anymore, and we'll long for the days where it felt new and exciting and we were a beginner and the progress felt fast. Because that's usually what we find. Like let's imagine that we're having our session together, Ryan. We've now talked about all of this stuff, and we're like, okay, so we've talked about wanting to become more familiar with the risks. We've kind of accepted the idea that we are going to feel like a beginner. Let's get practicing. So usually the first thing I'll do is we'll go around the gym, and I'm just going to make up some I'll make sure they're accessible and specific to the level of climber I'm working with. But let's get some easy wins of some physically easy, because we're usually still early in the session, we're warming up a little bit, but physically easy, but confidence and coordination challenging moves. So, and usually I'll start it as, I might even say, like, this might be like patronizingly easy, but literally just do this. And I'll like run towards the wall, jump onto a volume and jump off again and land back on the mats. I'm like, try that. And they'll do it. And they're like, yeah, okay, fine. That was easy. Maybe as we're doing this, I get an opportunity to go, let's talk about how to pace a running jump towards the wall correctly, because that's not a skill people have inherently. Judging the distance, making sure you land there with the right foot, that can be something that's good to go over. But usually we'll do a bit of practice of like, okay, cool, we've now done it 5 times. You've jumped on and off the volume. Let's make it a little bit more tricky. What about we were jumping on right foot onto the volume. What about doing right foot volume, left foot volume, and then jumping off the wall? So we're doing 2 steps on the volume now. And we'll do that 5 times or so. And then I might make it a little bit harder still and go, okay, what if we now do right foot volume, left foot volume, and then catch the jug above you? And then that's the end of the move. And because we've had this nice progression, they're building confidence as we go. If they don't do it, they might try it unsuccessfully a few times and then stick it. And then they stick it 5 more times. And then it's a really nice opportunity for me to ask, okay, you've now run and jumped off that volume about 20 to 30 times in the last 10 minutes or so. The risk of you slipping and hitting your face was there every single time. How many times has it happened? And usually the answer is, yeah, none, actually. Sometimes I can say, how many times did your foot even slip? And they're like, 0. Or they might say, actually, it did slip a couple of times, in which case I can also ask, like, okay, and what happened? And they're like, it was fine. Like, my foot slipped and nothing happened. I caught myself against the wall. So I've actually now already added like 30 experiences with risk where I feel a bit more confident. It's also really nice because it's also why I love teaching dynamic movement with people. It's because it's such a low requirement for strength a lot of the time. Everyone is so much better at it than they think they are, because it is usually like a fairly natural thing. I know a lot of the time it looks really complicated in competitions of jumping and bouncing and swinging and landing in all these precise positions, but a lot of the time it's run and jump off the thing, catch the thing. If you get people into the zone of like, just don't overthink it, just go for it confidently. At worst, you might slip and just catch yourself against the wall, but just try it confidently. And often the phrase I'll talk about is like, your body knows how to do it. Stop restraining your body from doing what it's already learned over the course of your life. Your body's really well equipped with muscle memory, hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness. Like, you already know how to do this, just go for it. And then they do it and it feels easy. And then the more confident we get, the more we get to try in the session. And usually that's like our first 20 minutes is we'll go around the gym, just bouncing around. And usually like we get to the end of 20 minutes and it's always so great for me to explain like, okay, number 1, did you enjoy it? And usually they're like, actually, yeah, I was quite surprised. That was stupidly good fun. It felt like I was running around in a playground, having a great time. I'm definitely like thoroughly warmed up because this is supposed to be the warm-up activity that we do together. And then it's also really good for me to point out, I think, that, and I'll usually ask them, I'm like, okay, so if you and I were doing this in a session together, I'll go, okay, Ryan, we've done 20 minutes of this. Think about how much confidence you gained over the last 20 minutes. Think about how much you learned in terms of, we talked about movement, we talked about the details of timing. Obviously, we haven't, but assume we had while we were going around trying these climbs together. Think about how much confidence you gained, how much you've learned in the last 20 minutes. And now think about this. You climb 3 times a week. And I'd just like you to do this for 20 minutes at the start of each of your sessions. If you're doing, we've done 20 minutes practice today and we've learned a lot, you would do an hour's practice a week, 4 hours practice a month. Usually, yeah, after a couple of months, you'll be crazy good at this. And you'll find it hard to believe how scary and how overwhelming you used to find running and jumping off a volume. Like you'll do it without thinking every time, which is when it becomes easy, is when you can do it without thinking.
I just love how you broke down like kind of the incremental nature of how you structure those first handful of attempts, if you will, or just the warm-up play. Because I'm of a mindset, or I tend to default into a mindset, and maybe others who are listening will as well, where you walk up and you see a problem and it's the red volumes or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, it starts here and it ends up there. And then in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, the goal is for me to get up there. And so I'm not thinking about running and just hitting it with 1 foot and bouncing off 5 times and then doing 2 feet and bouncing off and then going to the next one. You know, you're very deliberately, and this is, I'm sure, the benefit of a coach, but for those who are self-coached or don't even consider themselves self-coached, they're just like, I just like to go to the gym and climb. There's a little bit of like a mindset shift where you come in with some intentionality and you say, I'm not going to try to climb this boulder. I'm just going to try to jump off that volume a few times. And then I'm going to try and jump off that volume a few times, but maybe touch the next jug or grab the next jug. And so yeah, that incremental nature of it, I can see how that would be confidence building because you're not trying to get to the top. You're not trying to do the thing. You're essentially succeeding in your goal, which is to just jump off the thing a few times. And to your point, it's building this confidence of like, okay, I just did that 30 times and I didn't get hurt. I didn't smash my face as I feared. Maybe I can try the next move.
Exactly right. No, man, really well put for a bunch of reasons. Like I think in terms of learning the details of movement, breaking it down into smaller parts, I find really helpful. I kind of mentioned it earlier. Sorry, it's not going to be very helpful, but I'll show it on my phone. Otherwise, people can go and find it on my Instagram. We did a YouTube video once where me and a parkour athlete called Toby Seagar set this, here it is, this gigantic, long series of coordination moves which travelled across basically the whole gym. That, I think, is a great example of compy parkour-style bouldering. As I view it, it is kind of just a repeated combination of I do a couple of combos of either pulling or pushing with my hands and feet, and then I slow down into a dead point. And then I grab something, lose balance again, and then I do a couple more combos of pulling and pushing in different places with my hands and feet, and then I slow down into another dead point. And all of the complicated dynamic movement stuff, even that we see in the most complicated version in a competition, are just repeated combinations of that. It's rarely more than, at most, 3 or 4. We're at the really hard end, and sometimes it's on bad holds. It's not easy, but it's a combination of pull, push, pull again, slow down into a dead point. So then, yeah, as you say, when it comes to learning the details of these movements, trying it as like one little thing at a time, I practice running into a dead point on a volume. I practice jumping off a volume and landing in a dead point. I practice jumping off a volume, grabbing a hold, swinging and landing in a dead point, and then jumping off again. And after a while, you kind of go like, okay, well, if I'm just doing combinations of all these different little things I practiced, then yeah, all of the stuff that I'm doing in that warm-up is really useful. The other one that I think you touched on, which I actually didn't notice until a student pointed it out, my main aim when I was doing that with them was I wanted to do some dynamic coordination style movements which are physically easy specifically for this student, so they've got to be at a low level. There's nothing in this gym which is set for that. If there was, maybe we would have tried that, but there are no V1 jump onto the volume moves. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to make them up. And then they pointed out afterwards when we recap, they were like, I love that there were like no stakes to this. And I was like, well, actually, I didn't really know what they meant. So I was like, no, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, because it's not a set climb and there's no grade on it. So maybe it's V1, maybe it's V4, maybe it's V10. I don't know. No one else around me knows. So it almost, back to that idea of like, I'm worried I'll look stupid and like a beginner trying it. It almost like circumvents that because they're like, I think the damage to your ego that it would do, if you know you can climb V V7 on a certain style, and now here you are getting shut down on a V2, that can hurt and puts you off.
Sure.
If it has no grade on it and you're there going like, no, I'm just here practicing a thing, and everyone can see that I'm just practicing a thing because there's no grade on it, I'm clearly doing that. It makes it a lot easier to just kind of get into it and stop worrying about how you look doing it, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, very liberating to the ego. And as much as we try to, pull the ego out of things, the ego is tricky and it sneaks back in unbeknownst to us. So the recommendation for me, so if I, because I'm not going to be in London anytime soon and I don't have a coach here, but for me to go in, and we do have a lot of comp style problems at one of the gyms that I go to here, is even if it's a climb I could do, maybe it's a V2 and I feel like, although, I mean, I've been shut down on some slab, and coordination V2s, no doubt. But let's say it's a climb that I could do. Maybe I don't even target that one as part of this 20-minute warm-up exercise, but maybe I go just find a volume that's just part of a different climb, but then a hold that's above it that's not on the same climb, and essentially create a couple of moves or a ladder of movements that I can do to practice some of this running, jumping, tapping, without it feeling like it needs to roll up ultimately into a top out.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I think actually bigger topic to get into, not just race dynamic movement, but I think the separation of our self-worth and our ego from the success that we have is a really important step in learning to effectively practice something. Again, only feel like I learned this stuff for myself recently. I really struggled to get shut down on something that was below a grade that I thought I should be able to do. I feel like I sometimes have a lot of pressure, self-inflicted pressure, from having decided to show off on YouTube all the time. I feel like that, and knowing that I used to be on the national team when I was younger, I feel like I can have quite high expectations of myself. And this is one of the things I used to struggle with a lot more than I do nowadays. If I knew that I was capable of a certain level of performance, every time I saw any snapshots of evidence that conflicted with that self-expectation, it hurt, and it was really hard not to be so critical of myself, as I think a lot of people are. And it's something that I focus on a lot in our sessions of like, well, us temporarily even, or having a few attempts that aren't successful on a climb, one, doesn't mean that we aren't going to be able to do it, but also if we weren't able to do it, so what? That's okay. Like, that doesn't need to be a sad or hurtful, or I think maybe, I guess a better way of putting it is I try to practice it a lot, and I particularly try to do it when I'm coaching people, removing any sense of judgment from practicing stuff and from learning stuff, especially because, as we said, like, being a beginner means you are not going to be good at it yet. And if every time I try it and I'm not successful, I respond by going, see, I absolutely suck, I'm not going to get very far. But all of this is, I've learned it over a long time.
All right, y'all, just want to take a quick second here to tell you how I'm staying healthy and taking care of myself as I'm now pushing my body to the hardest limits I've ever pushed it as a rock climber. And the way that I'm fueling these gains that I'm working so hard to get is with PhysiVantage Nutrition. Y'all know PhysiVantage. They've been a sponsor of the show since the very first episode, and I've been a paying customer of PhysiVantage since long before there was ever a podcast. And why is that, Ryan? Why am I buying PhysiVantage products? Well, it's because they work. They're designed by climbers for climbers to help us climb our best. Every single day, I'm taking their supercharged collagen before I do like a little light fingerboard workout, like the Abra hangs that I've talked about here on this show, or before I go climbing or go to the gym. And I'm also fueling up either before or after a workout with one of their protein powders. It's like my sweet treat that I have. And the most important thing, as I mentioned, is that it works. Most coaches and doctors and dietitians are going to tell you that you should probably take in about 1 gram of protein per body weight every single day if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel your gains. So for me, 155 grams of protein is a lot of protein in a day. And I love a whole foods diet, but I have to supplement in order to hit that goal. And I do it by using PhysiVantage. Hit that link right there in your show notes and you'll get 15% off pretty much everything over at the PhysiVantage store, or use code STRUGGLE15 at checkout to get that discount, and let's get after it. Just want to take a quick second here to talk about how I'm keeping track of all my training and climbing over the course of days, weeks, months, and years. And I'm using an actual physical analog journal, a paper journal that I'm holding in my hands right now, called the 5-Year Training and Performance Journal. I created this. I've been using something like this for the last 9 years, and it's a reflective journal, meaning I put something in for every single day, and at the end of the year, the next year starts back underneath that first one. So that as you go, you are able to see where you were at 1 year prior, 2 years prior, 3 years prior. You can log your goals at the beginning of every month and see what you checked off. And then the big breakthrough for me is that I'm able to reflect back and see what training interventions are actually working, what are worthwhile, and maybe which ones aren't. And I'm also able to see with a ton of gratitude and joy how much progress I've made. And I've never been able to get that from training apps. I like training apps. They help me to do my training, but this reflective journal has totally changed how I'm able to understand my personal training, my performance, and then everything that I do as a climber, like all my notable routes that I've sent, all my thoughts and dreams, they're all in here. And I get to look back and enjoy that day after day and year after year. And now you can too, because I made it and I'm selling it. And for $40, I think that's probably the cheapest thing you could buy that will last you 5 years as a climber. You can learn more over at thestruggleclimbingshow.com/journal. And I like this as just as an actionable takeaway for me, because I'm spending on average 3 days a week in the gym right now. Sometimes it's 2, depends on if I get like a weather window, but I'm spending a lot of time on like steeper climbs because I've got this goal of getting much stronger on my kind of objective bouldering grade. But in any case, 20 minutes as a warm up to essentially just have some fun and bounce around and warm up the body and work on my comfort level on feeling a little less in control, if you will, by doing this. I think that's a really actionable takeaway. So I do that for 20 minutes, faff around on jumping off some volumes and maybe catching some holds and just not worrying about it being a project that I'm working on. Then what else can I do now to continue to build on that and be able to open up a lot of these problems at the gym that I just kind of walk past right now?
So, okay, there might be some other, I guess, momentum and movement and fluidity focused drills that we could go through. But I think a better step is to go, okay, let's say I'm now warmed up. I'm now ready to go and try some harder climbs. How can I best use my time? Not with all climbers, because some people actually do this naturally. Like, there's a student who I see once every other week or so, and it's almost frustrating because I spend the whole session basically going like, I don't get how you're doing this. I'll go into it briefly, but he's climbed for like 4 months, and he has this insane combination of, he used to do loads of skateboarding, so I think that's given him a really, really good relationship with risk. Like when I'm often looking at something or trying to explain it to a student going like, oh, we might have to try it 100 times without success and you might fall off, and I guess there's a risk that you could sprain your ankle. Like, yeah, that's bouldering. He's often looking at stuff going like, oh, I'm used to doing it 1,000 times without success over concrete, so yeah, whatever. So he's really, really good at just taking risks. And then weirdly, he's pretty decently strong. Like, not the strongest in the world, but he's got really intuitive movement. He did a move where I had shown it to him first, and then he basically did it so quickly that I literally, almost with a sense of frustration, was like, you're joking. What the... I explained it to him afterwards, like, okay, you basically sprint full pace at the wall, you kick off hard enough that you launch yourself vertically about 4 feet or so in the air, and then you have to land really precisely on a very small, smeary foothold on a volume. And I basically explained it to him. I was like, this is specifically the thing that I've practiced so much, and I consider myself to be really good at. I spent half an hour learning how to do that move yesterday. So what business do you have doing it on your second try? What is this? But anyway, it's also a good reality check for me of going like, sometimes people are good at stuff, and that doesn't need to make me feel bad. So I did a good check of like, you can just be excited for him. It's not a criticism of my own performance that he can do that quickly. Whatever, he's just doing great. Good for him. But anyway, back to the actual topic, which was, we're now warmed up. What should our focus be when we go around trying harder climbs? I think he models it really well, which is, as shown by his lack of investment in the climbs, even though we spent quite a while on them, he doesn't really care about the success he has throughout his session. He is mostly, in fact, I'd say entirely there to try hard and to learn some cool stuff. And it means we're so productive all the way through the session. And so this is usually what I explain to students. I was like, if we specifically set our intentions for trying harder climbs around the gym as not, I want to get up a certain grade or I want to complete a certain thing, because that's what I used to do, and it's what most climbers do. That is the result of there being a grading system.
Sure.
I think when I was younger, I would say, my aim is to complete a climb with a high number on it, so I can see that I'm getting better at climbing. How could that not be my aim? We put a measurement system on it so I can see if I'm getting better. Why would I not do that? But the issues with that are I think, stunts my progress by affecting the choices I make as to which climbs I spend time on. And it also makes it hard to be satisfied with my sessions if I don't have the success I'm looking for. And complete a climb with a higher number than I've managed before is a high bar to set for every session. So yeah, okay, let's explore that quickly. If your aim was to succeed on a climb with a high number on it, what sort of climb would you spend your time looking for in the gym, Ryan?
Ones that are right within my wheelhouse.
Exactly. Yeah, of course you would. What if you wanted to do a high number? Why on earth would you look for something you're bad at? That's a terrible idea. So yeah, you would look for something that suits you, which doesn't really challenge you or make you learn or change in any way. And I think the other issue, as we touched on, the feeling of frustration, a lack of success. If you say your aim is to complete the climb with a high number, and you go all session from couldn't pull on to, on my last go, I did the whole thing, and then I just slipped before I could match the finish hold, and so now I'm leaving empty-handed, feeling frustrated that I didn't complete the climb. No actual sense of, wow, I must have made so much progress because I went from not being able to pull on. But anyway, so those are my issues with being slightly more success-oriented. If our aims were, though, to try really hard and learn stuff, what sort of climb would you look for?
Well, the stuff that we're talking about right now, the stuff that pushes me out of my comfort zone, which would probably be like a V3 or a V4, kind of comp style problem.
But it's good that you do that. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because sometimes, I was speaking to a student the other day, there's a V9 in the corner of the gym. It's steep and overhanging. It's got loads of crimps. It's powerful. It's exactly the sort of stuff I actually really like. I like jumpy, bouncy stuff a lot, but I also really like a good, just hard board style climb.
Right.
So yeah, in one of my sessions, it sounds like a flex, but I'm going somewhere with that. I flashed it, and I felt very good about myself. I was like, ooh, good for my ego. Flash the hard climb. Right. And then I refocused. I'm like, wait. What are we here for, Louis? I want to try hard, and I want to learn things. The experience I just had on that V9, was I trying hard? Yeah, a bit. Yeah, but realistically, it suits my strengths so well that I'm not trying that hard, and it's very firmly in my comfort zone, so I kind of was expecting to flash it, and I did, so great. So no, I'm not trying particularly hard. And then my next question of, am I learning anything by doing this? It's like, God, no, I'm learning nothing on this thing. So, okay, what I actually want to spend my time doing, because I think we can also, we don't need to explore this that much, but one of the things most of us actually really like about climbing is the feeling of progress and learning stuff and slowly getting better at something. That's the experience that we kind of all want to have, is the perfect level of challenge where at first it feels impossible, then we make progress, and we make more and more progress, and ideally you then succeed at the end.
Right.
But
very linear, lower left to upper right on the graph.
It would be great, but if I entirely focus on the want to try hard, want to learn stuff, not fussed about the outcome, then it's really nice that I can, and I'll often pose this as a question to students, of let's say you and I then spend half an hour working on the V4 jumpy dyno that you selected as, nope, this is going to make me try hard, it's going to make me learn stuff. Let's say you make loads of progress, you work out some of the moves, you stick some of the positions, but the whole thing never then comes together, and we then run out of time. It's the end of our session. I usually get students to realise how valuable it was by saying, okay, if I was to now say, Ryan, well, we spent half an hour on it, you didn't do it, so waste of our time, huh? You would correctly go on and explain how it wasn't a waste of time. What were our aims? We wanted to try hard, and we did. We tried hard the whole time. Probably we had a great time trying it together as well. And you would also explain, you're like, well, actually, I learned loads of cool stuff. Like, I learned the details of how this move works. I didn't think I could stick that position, and actually I climbed into it, and no, I totally can hold that. And actually I can see that if I was only focused on success, I might have viewed my progress over time graph as this flat line going nowhere. No, I can see that this is going upwards, and I just need to try it for longer, and I'll do it.
We're always our own toughest critics, right? And
let's talk
this
about
is what you entered into this conversation through this lens of struggle and self-worth.
Absolutely.
And how often is it that we're at the gym and really struggling on something and thinking, everybody must be thinking I'm just like, terrible at this, or I'm punting, or we'll just say it to ourselves like, what a waste of a session. I couldn't do this. But no one would ever say that to us, right? Like a coach would never say that to us, but like the stranger over that's working behind the desk would never but we say it to ourselves. And how can we, do you think, Like, I love that exercise that you had at the end where you were kind of playing devil's advocate and you're like, oh, what a wasted session, prove me wrong. And now the climber is saying, well, I did this and I did this. Is there a way for us to try to, if I'm just climbing by myself and I had that session, is there a way for me to prompt myself to be a little bit kinder and a little bit more positive, which is really just having an actual realistic lens on the session rather than such a self-critical lens?
Yes, man, thank you for this, because this is the stuff I love talking about. And to be honest, I find it really rare not to end up talking about inner critic, inner monologue, this self-worth and how we treat ourselves sort of idea with students, because it comes up so much, particularly when we're trying something that we're not yet very good at. Right. We tend to be really hypercritical. And almost exactly what you just said. It's something that I say, again, never realized that I wasn't applying this to myself until recently. But we treat ourselves in a way that we don't deserve. We treat ourselves in a way we would never treat someone else. And as you say, if someone else tried to treat us this way, we wouldn't put up with it for a second. But we do treat ourselves that way in this horribly critical, brutal way. Yeah, as you say, like and I often illustrate that to students. I was like, they might say something critical about themselves. Like they fall off the climb and they're like, oh, stupid attempt. Whoa. Let's imagine that you tried the climb, fell off and had a completely neutral reaction about it. If I then came over and reacted like, that was so stupid, you looked like an idiot trying that, you would immediately go like, what the hell is this? I can't believe you're speaking to me like this. How dare you? I'm not paying for this lesson. Again, you would never put up with that from somebody else. You also, as you said, you would never talk to someone else that way. It's a monstrous way to behave. People don't behave that way. And we do that to ourselves. I think a lot of us learn it from various places, or we see it demonstrated by certain people, and we assume this is the way we're supposed to treat ourselves if we want to be successful. Because I'm sure there are lots of examples of people who are visibly brutal to themselves and yet are performing at a high level. That's probably one of the places we pick it up from. I'm tempted to say that they're performing at that level despite that inner critic. I mean, maybe not, I'm not world champion of anything, but I would maybe use myself as an example, saying, as I've said at the start of this podcast, I've done a lot with my climbing, and I'm relatively known on YouTube, and I've reached a fairly high level. And actually, I was being pretty brutal to myself the whole time. Like, the reason I like talking about all this inner critic, inner monologue, self-worth stuff is I actually find it really difficult, and I struggle with it a lot.
If it's not too intrusive to ask what tools you've been using to help to address that, to shift that dialogue, I think I would find it useful, and others would as well, because if our default position is to be self-critical, we can certainly learn or unlearn those patterns and learn better, more positive patterns. And it's just maybe something that is fresh in your mind right now because you've been going through it.
No, absolutely, man. No, this is what I was wanting to talk about next, is like, obviously, I think a lot of my role as a coach, and it's why I think people enjoy having a session with me, I often view it almost as one of my main tasks of the session is to drown out their own inner critic with all of the stuff that I think they could be saying to themselves instead. And surprise, we have a really enjoyable session and they climb harder than usual, because every time they wanted to say something horrible to themselves, there's me suddenly jumping in going, wow, great effort, that was awesome, God, you tried so hard, let's have a go at it again. I think if you do this, that and the other, that could go really well next time. And I'm doing it really intentionally of not giving them space to think those things to themselves, because I drown it out. It works. It works really well, because, to be clear, if it was proven to be more successful to get a better performance out of somebody by literally beating them and yelling at them, then maybe coaches would spend more time doing that. But I don't think many coaches do that. I think most coaches do focus on the sort of stuff I'm talking about. Let's be less critical. Let's be less judgmental. Let's actually focus on what we can do better at. And this is one of the things I actually try really, really hard to do. And I describe myself as very specific and very pedantic with the language I try to use. I try to only say things which are true and which are helpful. And I do that in the coaching sessions. As I just demonstrated, I might say something like, maybe they tried hard and they fell off halfway, and it's an unsuccessful attempt and they're disappointed about it. And I would say things which are only true and helpful. I would say, that was really exciting. You tried really hard. Those things are true. And now here are some things that I think we could focus on to make better use of your next attempt. And it's likely to go better. Nothing I've said there is untrue or unhelpful. Those are all true and helpful things. But now the challenge, as I've only found recently for myself, is how do I train myself to think that way when I'm on my own? Because obviously, as we said, it's easy when I'm drowning it out for them. a lot of practice, I'm afraid. So for me, for a long time, wasn't even aware that I was being really like bullying myself in my head all the time. And if I was aware of it, I thought it wasn't a problem. And I think loads of people, I think bigger one we won't touch on, I think people who I see doing this to themselves in the climbing centre, and then they fall off a climb, and I can see them being so angry at themselves and sometimes literally hitting themselves with frustration and disappointment with themselves. I think it's likely they do that in a lot of other areas of their life, not just in the climbing centre. And that's a hard way to live. Adds a lot of pressure, and it's not the happiest way you can be, saying this from personal experience. So yeah, I think an awareness of, and so much of this, by the way, I've learned from reading. There's a specific book I always reference. I will probably read more books on the subject at some point, but one of my favourites that I've read is The Inner Game of Tennis by Tim Galway.
Oh, so good.
Oh my God, you've read it. It's so good.
Yeah.
I love it. I tell everyone about it. Annoyingly, a friend of mine told me for, I think, years that I would really enjoy reading it. And finally I read it. I was like, oh, God damn it. It changed my life. So yeah, everyone read that. It's not even a long read. But yeah, he illustrates really effectively right at the start of the book that we should appreciate that there are two selves. There's your inner critic, and there's you, who's, I guess, separate from your inner critic. Like when you yell at yourself, there's clearly a conversation going on. So being aware of what that relationship is like and noticing the sort of things you're saying to yourself, I think is like the first step. And that's not an easy one. That takes a lot of practice on its own. Like I say, lots of people don't even realise they're doing it. Once I've then been aware of it and I start noticing it more and more, I think my next recommendation is start going like, okay, start being a bit more analytical of it. Like, it is the stuff that I'm saying to myself. I've got a bunch of different ways of phrasing it, but usually it's stuff like, easy one for me, would I say that to a student? And so much of the time I'm like, no, of course I wouldn't say that. That wouldn't be, it was not even true and it's not helpful. So no, I wouldn't say it to them. Otherwise you can't even just say like, easy one, would I say that to someone I love? No, you wouldn't say those things. And then I try and turn it into a game, and I'm doing it constantly all the time. So yeah, I do say it is like a practice thing. Because like learning a climbing skill, like at first you aren't even conscious of the skills that you don't know. When you're a new climber, we don't even know what a drop knee is. And when we see it, we don't even recognise it. Right. And then you get to a point where you're like, no, I can do a drop knee, but I need to be on an easy climb, and I need to like instruct my body through the process. If we're going back to the mindset analogy, that might be us noticing the language we're using on ourselves and intentionally changing it for something different and something truer and more helpful. And then further on in our climbing, we get to the point where we're like, oh, I've now practiced it so much that without even thinking, I just do drop knees when it feels right, left, right, and centre. And that's kind of the point I would love to get to with my mindset, and which I hope I'll get to with a lot of practice, is that I don't immediately say mean stuff to myself and have to correct it for something truer and more helpful and more kind. I automatically think in kinder, truer, more helpful things. And it does it's getting better for me, but it does very much feel completely different. If I was so used to spending years and years of falling off a climb and going, you idiot, Louis, come on, you stupid, just grab the hold. Like, what are you doing? How could you fumble that? And suddenly I feel like I'm getting closer to a point where I fall off something, and that he was such a bully, but now he goes like, nice effort. That was super close. Man, you tried so hard. That was great. Okay, I think if we focus on this, and it's like I'm coaching somebody, and happier, lighter, feel better, climb harder as well, like so much better. So yeah, I think it's an awareness of your inner critic, and I think it's also good to be aware of like, yeah, that inner critic, he's trying to help. Like, he knows I want to be better at climbing, and he's trying to help, but he's not good at it, and he needs retraining. So I've done it before where someone's walked in and I was literally like talking to myself in a gym, because I almost imagine sometimes like, no, there's three people almost. I worry I sound insane. Like I'm hearing all these voices. I'm not hearing voices. This is just like me like mediating my inner monologue and stuff. But
sure,
there's me who's being yelled at by my inner critic and is going like, yeah, you're right. Oh, it's stupid of me to miss it. And my inner critic going like, yeah, terrible. Oh, you're terrible at this. Oh man, you're never going to be any good at this. And then often me feeling like I'm stepping above it going, okay, you inner critic, this is not helpful actually. Look, you're making him feel really sad. He's not going to climb any better. I think you could say this instead. That would be really helpful. So almost like feeling like you're stepping above it and mediating this conversation as if you are helping people repair a relationship to get it a bit more productive. Because yeah, that inner critic now, he's like, yeah, okay, I want to help. I want Louis to be better at climbing. Now I know better things to say, which are actually way more helpful for him. But it's something to practice. I always kind of say to students, I would love it if I could talk about some mindset stuff and they would go, oh, click, thanks, Louis. I've got a great mindset now. Like, how great would that be? But I think a better analogy for it is, imagine you're training a muscle. And yeah, for a long time, we don't even know that muscle exists. Then we might get to a point where we're like, okay, I'm aware that muscle exists and it's really weak and I don't even know how to train it. And then we slowly learn different methods and we start strengthening that muscle a little bit. And over time, it gets stronger and better.
I think it's incredibly helpful. I mean, just through your experience and your perspective, but also some tools, some resources out there and some things that you've actually been doing. And my strong assumption here is that in addressing a lot of this, the things we've been talking about, for this entire conversation, which is just really understanding risk, really understanding fear, understanding ego, improving kind of how we self-coach ourselves, our inner critics. All of those, none of those have anything to do with tying bells around our ankles or improving our finger strength, but addressing those when it comes to, this style of climbing, certainly the style of climbing for me. For others, it might be steep climbing. Maybe they're very familiar with and comfortable on slab, but they are really tough on themselves on steep climbing. There's, we all have our anti kind of style, or these things that there's some resistance to take on, and we feel like we might be a fool if we try them. Addressing those, I feel like, will result in not only faster gains, but also just more enjoyment as we go to the gym and try to become more well-rounded climbers. I do want to talk about some kind of practical things, some skills or some drills or ideas or tips or whatever that you may have that could suit the audience if they're now feeling good about this place that they're in, or it's a place that they're working on to become better as gym climbers and to improve. But I'm glad we've spent the lion's share on what we've talked about, because I think it's probably holding more of us back, more so than we probably are even aware of.
I said it to a student recently, I was like, if I only had 1 minute to coach every student I come across, I wouldn't bother with anything related to strength or fitness or flexibility or training. I wouldn't bother with anything related to technique or movement. I would only want to talk about being kinder to ourselves and being less judgmental of ourselves and being less critical of ourselves. Because I think if people got a handle on that, everyone would learn everything they needed to, and they'd do it all themselves. But I think that is often the main thing that holds us back.
It was a real delight, Lou. I just appreciate you bringing all of your experience and also just your openness and your vulnerability to be able to explore these themes as we've done. And I hope we get a chance to do another one of these, because I think there's many stones left unturned. So perhaps a round 2 at some point in time will be in order.
I would absolutely love that, man. It was an absolute joy talking to you. Like you say, I don't do podcast stuff that regularly, but I always really enjoy it. And you were so easy to talk to. I absolutely loved this. And yeah, if people want more of it, I would love to do another one. If you get loads of feedback like, man, that guy can talk, that's enough for a little while. And that's also fine. I won't mind that. I'm happy doing my own talking separately in my own sessions. But yeah, if you want to do more, man, you let me know. I'll be delighted.
Oh, dude. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, you may come to regret that, but I'm going to hold you to it now because we've got it on tape. And you only do in-person coaching, right? You don't do remote?
We're working on it at the moment. We are about to. It's not quite like personalized remote coaching, but actually, if I'm going to plug stuff,
yeah, please. This is the opportunity to plug.
Perfect. So, okay, options of how you can get involved with me and my coaching and the things I do. Obviously, if you come to London, you can book a lesson with me. You do need to book that in advance. I'm usually booked up for a couple of months nowadays, but you can book a lesson with me. You can also book with any of the team of coaches that I've trained around London. They're all really lovely, very experienced and good coaches. So you can do that as well. If you're in London already, you can join one of the in-person teams that we run on a weekly basis. We've got loads of different teams of different age and experience level running all over London. They have like a weekly session. There's a big teams social that we run every month. It's really fun. And you get personalized training plans and discounts on private coaching. Good vibes. Everyone on the teams really loves it. If you are not in London and have no plans to come to London, then maybe by the time you're listening to this podcast, we will have launched our remote training options. If we haven't, though, then I'd encourage you to all, it sounds boring, but go to the YouTube channel. At the minimum, I'd recommend you subscribe to the YouTube channel because you get to see all these fun videos that we do. But we're actually launching it, man, I'm doing it right after this call, so it's definitely going to be available a month from now. We're relaunching our YouTube membership. So not just subscribe, but join as a member of the Catalyst online squad. Sorry, I should have said the YouTube channel is called Catalyst Climbing.
I'll link to it all.
Thank you. That's great, Ryan. But yeah, if you join as a YouTube member for $2.99 a month, which is not very much money, you can get weekly training plans for on-the-wall practice from myself with loads of tips on mindset and movement and technique, generally becoming a better and happier climber. And you also get a load of off-the-wall training on a weekly basis from Neil Gresham. If you don't know him, he's one of the most experienced coaches in the UK. Man, if you see him, I think he's just turned 50, but has the body of a 20-year-old Greek god and is still climbing like really hard. So he really knows his training stuff. So you can get weekly training plans from us. You can also get bonus behind-the-scenes YouTube content and a members-only Discord channel. And that's all for $2.99 a month for our YouTube members. So
that's for $3. How do you do it? You need to raise your prices. That's insane.
We've actually just dropped the prices because we were doing it for more. This is what I'm about to go online and do right after this. We have been running it for a while, but we've worked really hard over the last few months to make it slightly more streamlined in how we do it. And overall, we're like, I actually think we were relying on a certain number, signing up at a certain price. I actually think we're instead going to aim for way more people signing up at a lower price. And we actually already had the option, which loads of people seem to go for. You can just be, we've got it as a YouTube option right now, but I'm gonna get rid of this option fairly soon. You can just join as a YouTube supporter for $1.99 a month, where I kind of even say, I was like, you don't get anything, but it's just nice that you support us. And loads of people do that already. So we're like, okay, let's do one membership, $2.99 a month. We'll give you loads and loads of really good stuff. And we want everyone to come and join. So we're aiming for it to be the most accessible in terms of all of those weekly training plans for on and off the wall stuff I was talking about. They all come with detailed PDF documents, loads and loads of video demos for everything that you're doing. And we want everyone to find it really accessible and easy to start doing, and really affordable, which also adds to the accessibility of it, which is, I think, one of my main aims. If I have a big aim as a climber, it's that, as we've talked about, I've learned to be happier and I think a better person through my experiences in climbing over the last 20 years. And I want everyone to have a similar thing. Climbing is really good for us and it makes us happier and I think it makes us better. So more climbing, more training, get to work, everybody. Come join as a YouTube member.
All right, that wraps things up with my new best friend over there, Captain Cut Loose, Louis Parkinson. What a dude. Louis, thank you. I can't wait to chat again and talk more about cats and also climbing stuff. And hey, if you are listening to this right now, that means you stuck through this whole thing. That means you love Louis, you love indoor climbing, and you want to get better. Well, guess what? We've got a whole other conversation that we recorded on the heels of this that answered listener questions all about their climbing and their training. And I'm releasing it as a bonus episode for subscribers of the show, which you can be for free. So I'll tell you about that in just a second. But first, let me tell you what Louis covers in this bonus conversation. Well, we talk about when to give up versus when to persevere on a hard move or a hard climb. And he's got a pretty good way to kind of determine that, or how he works with himself and his clients on how to determine essentially when to walk away or when to keep going. He also shares, kind of as part of that, his 100 attempts rule, which I found really, really interesting, the way he broke that down. We talk about repeating boulders and not only why boulder repeats can be so valuable, but also how to do those repeats, like what to look at, what to work on, how to repeat boulders in a way that helps us to squeeze every bit of learning possible out of a set problem at a gym. I've been doing that actually myself lately since recording this conversation with Louis. And it's been crazy, actually, the movement learning that I've been getting from implementing his repeat boulder kind of protocol or philosophy, if you will, has just been so awesome. We talk about route setting and what happens when setting goes bad. And in fact, how to identify kind of quote unquote bad setting or risky, dangerous, non-helpful type of setting and what to do about that when we're having a gym session. We talk about programming and how to program our gym sessions to optimize skill and strength development. And Louis also shares what he's up to next, what his goals are for indoor training and climbing, as well as comps and outdoors, and whether he's getting older or actually just hitting his physical prime. Really, really fascinating conversation. Awesome questions sent in from Patreon listeners and subscribers. And I'm really grateful for all of that. So you can access that right now for free with a trial over at Patreon or in Apple subscriptions, or if you're a Spotify listener, you can do it right there in your Spotify player. It's linked to Patreon now, which is cool. So hop in there, grab the free trial, hear the rest of this bonus conversation, and grab yourself over 100 hours of other bonus content from the likes of Magnus Mitbo to Alex Honnold, Tom Randall, Allison Vest, Nina Williams, Hazel Finlay, Will Bosey, so many others, 100 hours of bonus conversations, content, and videos for supporters of the show. And it only costs like a beer each month. So if you could buy me a beer each month for me to be grinding away out here in the podcast/utility closet, I'd really appreciate it. And you know what? If you listen for a few months or you get everything out of it that you want and you want to quit, that's totally fine. There's no commitment. You can join and quit anytime. Of course, I really appreciate it if you can stick around. That's how I keep things going over here. So thank you so much. I love ya. Now, if you'd like to see the uncut video of this chat, plus score instant access to more than 100 hours of amazing bonus content, and I'm talking about episodes with the likes of Adam Andra, Hazel Finley, Alex Honnold, Magnus Mitbo, Chris Sharma, Allison Vest, and so many more amazing athletes and coaches, well, you can get it all right now for about the price of a beer each month. And I gotta tell you, I could go for a beer right now because I've been working really hard out here in the podcast/utility closet. So if you are in a position to buy me one of those ice cold beers, it would be so rad. There's also a free trial happening right now, so if you want to date me a little bit before you buy me that beer, I get it. You can listen to all that bonus content for free and then stick around if you like it. Just swing on over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to get access to that full library right now. Or if you're an iPhone person, you can subscribe right there in your Apple podcast player. Thank you so much. Huge thanks and appreciation to our show sponsors who have brought you this episode at zero cost. Check your show notes for the links and special discounts to those brands that are only available to Struggle listeners. And by the way, you can see all of the show's awesome sponsors and special deals by just popping over to thestruggleclimbing.com/deals. Hey, did you know that The Struggle's carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? They are just doing amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. You can get inspired by their latest grant recipients over at honnoldfoundation.org, and then just toss them some love if you can, even a few bucks a month. They're doing such cool and impactful work. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by Glen Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked it, and if you like this show just in general, would you consider sharing it with your climbing friends? The more who listen, the closer that I will get to making this my full-time gig, which would be so cool. So thank you in advance for sharing this episode and also rating and reviewing it if you got a hot second. Really appreciate you. I hope your training and your climbing are going great. And if you're struggling like me, well, at least the struggle makes us stronger. I'll see you soon.